I'm going to just go back to the very beginning if that's okay.
Not a problem.
If that's okay, sorry. We get back to the beginning here and restart my thing. There's my bio. Carriage Houses of Louisville. Louisville is a great place in which to live. Here are some rankings that prove that over the years. I wrote a book called Historic Homes of Louisville, and a lot of these homes had carriage houses behind them, and that's how I came up with the next book, which is called Carriage Houses of Louisville. There's a nice carriage house, and I will mention that later in the program, this house that's on the front of this. And here are some vintage images of Louisville with the horse carriages out front. There, in fact, that horse there, I think, is eating from that wheelbarrow, if you will. They probably rolled out either some water or some oats for it to eat. There's some more vintage photographs. There's St. James Court. There they are off to the Derby. Sam Culberson was, I think he's either the president or vice president of Churchill Downs at the time. But yeah, kind of rickety sort of a wagon ride out to the Churchill Downs, which was right down the street from where he lived. We got a lot of cabinet carriage makers here in Louisville. Here are some ads for them. And this, I mean, if you go into old Louisville, you see these alleyways that have carriage houses on either side. Here's a carriage house off the side of an alleyway there in old Louisville. The horses would be on the lower level. The residence for the servants would be up top. Another carriage house there. And again, they would take the hay for the horses in through the upper door here, using this beam at the top to haul up the straw for the horses. This is another alley in Old Louisville. Carriage house here with some interior photographs of it. This is a fascinating carriage house. This is what it looks like off the alleyway. But on the other side, it looks like this, very flamboyant design on the front, which faces the mansion, whereas the alley side does not have such a decorative facade. It's very basic. And this carriage house was able to allow the carriages to go right through. You go from the alley side, it had doors on both sides of the facade so that the carriages could be pulled through the backyard, if you will, to allow the occupants of the house to board and get on. That's what the front of the house looked like. I think it was Samuel Gravefelder House. I think he was involved in the bourbon industry. The Ferguson Mansion, which is now home of the Filson Historical Society. This is a very flamboyant style home. Cost about $1 million back in the day, about 100 or so years ago. But the carriage house itself looks very decorative as well, which most people would like to use as their main home.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Houston house, Houston was president of the L&N Railroad, and his carriage house is right behind there at 4th and Park. It's now a bed and breakfast. There's some images of it. It's been converted to residential use now. There's no longer carriages or horses allowed inside. It's just a bed and breakfast.
Oh, that's pretty.
Very, very beautifully done. Conrad Caldwell House, one of the more iconic landmark homes of Louisville. It's now a house museum, Richardsonian Romanesque design. And I've always wondered what the carriage house looked like for this home. When you think about
Looks like a castle.
the extravagant appearance of this, like you say, it's a castle. What does the carriage house look like?
Was Caldwell with the
Well,
hardware?
no, he was actually a water tank company, Caldwell Tanks, which still exists, by the way.
Okay.
The company still is there. But in 1897, there's William Caldwell with his horse carriage. And then there he is in 1903 with his horseless carriage.
Yes.
And we'll talk about the transition from horses to automobiles here in the next few slides. Y'all can come on in if you would like to.
She just
Okay.
passing by, but thank you so
And if
much.
you can close the door, the noise is kind of low.
I will do it.
And so here is the Conrad Caldwell House. Where it's positioned, the red box right there is the carriage house, but actually, it turns out, it was more of a barn and not a carriage house. The servants actually lived in the main house, and the horses and carriages were just in the barn area behind it. So it was not as extravagant as the main house design. This next carriage house always baffled me. So this is 3rd Street, 1323 South 3rd in the old Louisville area. This is an aerial photograph, and there's a vacant lot, a missing tooth along all the homes here on 3rd Street. There's a vacant lot right there. It's like, I don't know, why we have a vacant lot there? Because there's a carriage house behind it, a very ornate looking carriage house in the upper right hand corner there. And so what was there in that vacant lot that serviced this carriage house, I thought? So I had to do some research. Here are the buildings adjacent to it. We've got this house there, and then an apartment building to the north of it there. But again, we had it's a sort of a missing tooth. Welcome.
I'm sorry I'm late, I have physical therapy.
That's fine.
Because
Just
I really wanted to see this.
take your seat and we'll keep it moving.
Take your seat and be quiet, that's right.
That looks like a converted silo.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's very interesting design for this carriage house. So I did some investigation, like what's in this vacant lot? What was there previously? Was there a house here? And the rumor was that this carriage house back here actually had a carriage maker in it, that he would make the carriages and use that lot to display his carriages to sell. So that was what I'd been told. Well, as a historian, well, I've heard a lot of folklore stories. I said, was that true or not? So I did more investigation. I just didn't take that as the reason why that vacant lot is there. Let's see if a carriage, can I find who owned that carriage house, and was he a carriage maker? And let's put the rest finally how this was done. So I did a variety of research items here. I contacted my fellow historians, looked at local history books, talked to the owner of the property, and researched some Courier-Journal archives to come up with what I found. I found this one article that appeared in 1903 that actually indicated that carriage house right there, and it talks about it in this article. Very nice, but it does not really say who owned it or why the vacant lot was there. But I did find a reference to it that other people thought it was a very nice carriage house also. I then looked at some old maps. These are some of the dates of some of the maps I looked at. And what was interesting was I found this 1905 map which showed the carriage house and showed that it was connected to another house right there. And it was showing a vacant lot also that was there. So that was intriguing. So what was in this vacant lot? Why is this one house shown? And by the way, this carriage house is currently owned by this house right here. So there was a lot of misleading information that I had to connect the dots with. And so here is how I went about connecting the dots. I looked at the old telephone directories. The street address had changed over time. And in 1893, I found the name Margaret Conway owning this area. Margaret Conway. Who is Margaret Conway, and why is she owning this property? Well, it turns out that Margaret Conway was the wife of George Conway, who was partner in the Fulton Conway Wagon Manufacturing Company. He died in 1890, and Margaret was a sister to the Bacon brothers, who owned the Bacon department stores. So this folklore about a carriage maker owning that carriage house has some truth to it, because George Conway and Margaret Conway were connected to the Fulton Conway Manufacturing Company, which was located down on Main Street. So they didn't actually build carriages here, but they did own the property. So again, here's Fulton Conway Wagon Company down on West Main Street, and Bacon's department store there.
Look at that.
Fulton Conway is now the home of the Sons of the American Revolution down on West Main, near, I think it's near 7th Street or so in that area. And then, of course, Bacon's unfortunately no longer exists.
Yeah.
But,
It's a good place to shop.
so this carriage house and this property was all connected to these businesses. Here is the Bacon family plot in Cave Hill Cemetery, where the Bacons, a Bacon department store, are buried. And there are the George Conway and his wife, Margaret Bacon Conway, are buried there at Cave Hill. So now then, the question I have is, what did Margaret Bacon Conway's house look like? Because the house was demolished. It was demolished back in the mid-1920s, and an apartment complex was built there. So I was curious as to, golly, if the carriage house looked really nice, what did her house look like? So you can see some of the steps that I went through to determine what that house looked like. Here was one first clue. Part of the house was featured in this 1901 pictorial in the Courier Journal about the facades of nice homes in old Louisville area, beautiful entrances. So I had a little glimpse that it was a very nice house that was there. And then I did some more looking. I looked at the Courier Journal newspaper. I knew that the apartment building was built in 1926. And then I, again, looked at the Courier Journal archives. And I came up with an ad that appeared in, I think this was 1924, this ad, for the sale of the house. They were selling, so there's an image of the house there, and they were selling it. It was the former residence of Margaret Bacon Conway. It says late, she had just passed away. And notice it mentions about the carriage house there. By the way, the house was for sale for $40,000 in 1925, which equals to just over $700,000 in today's dollars. Personally, I would think that house in today's dollars would be way more than $700,000. I would put that almost at 1.5, double that amount. So that was, like it says, it was a bargain back in those days. And that's the reason why it was a Chicago developer that purchased the house, tore it down, and built an apartment complex there. So, question, there you can see the entranceway there that was in the Courier Journal paper. And so who designed the house? I think it was Clark and Loomis Architects, because when you look at other Clark and Loomis architectural houses, very similar to this Bacon Conway house. I did a lot of comparisons, if you will, but very similar, so I would say that Clark and Loomis were the architects for it. And there's the house again. By the way, it has since been totally renovated. I probably need to update this photograph, but the current owners of this carriage house have renovated it into apartments, and they lease them out to U of L students. U of L is just to the south here. It looks very nice now. This is a little dated photograph. Firehouses used to be carriage houses. They had both the horses and the apparatus in the lower level, and of course the firemen stayed in the upper parts. This is in Butchertown. There was a historic firehouse there that was renovated into a residence. Someone lives here now as one residence, and here are some images of what it looks like today.
1419 East Washington.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's right opposite St. Joseph's Catholic
Yeah,
Church.
that's what I was wondering. I was
And
going to ask you.
And it used to be, I think, Don Allen's antique or furniture or something, interior design store. But anyway, some more photographs of it. Still has some of the old wood flooring from the carriage house days. Very nice. They even have a big horse over the mantle. Again, this is someone's home. Very nice. think Marie Antoinette would love this. Very tastefully done. This is an image of it when it was a fireman carriage house, and they kept the fireman's pole there. It's still there in the house. So again, the fire department did have horse carriages, or horses to pull their apparatus. Here are some more images of that. Back in the day when horses drew the fire wagons. More images of historic fire stations that are still there. These fire stations have been repurposed. This one right here has been turned into an artist studio. It kind of looks dilapidated from the exterior, but you go inside it and it's a working studio for this artist, this sculptor that owns it. That's another historic view or sketch of it. And he has kept some of the decorations or the furniture within it, give it that feel of a firehouse. Here are some other firehouses throughout the city that used to be have horses within them and are now repurposed into some other things. Some of these are still firehouses, like the one in the upper right-hand corner of the Garland one, I think still a firehouse. So is the Preston Street one. This one in the lower right-hand corner actually is now home to Quill's coffee shop. And this one here on 6th has been turned into some sort of store or office area. More horse-drawn type of firehouses. Even more. This is the Silver Dollar Restaurant on Frankfurt Avenue. This firehouse on Bardstown Road used to hold a tapestry or a rug, ornamental rug company, and now it's home to an engineering firm.
Did you said the name of the restaurant?
Silver Dollar.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Silver Dollar here
Okay,
on
okay.
Frankfurt Avenue.
Yeah.
Correct. Here is a carriage house back in old Louisville. It's the Levi Carriage House of the Levy Brothers department store fame. This is where one of the Levys lived, and it just recently was renovated, that carriage house. Very nicely done. But again, it's now, while it was originally for horses, now they have automobiles there. This was not so much a carriage house, it was more of a barn. This is in Crescent Hill on Peterson Avenue at George Rogers Clark Place. And this upper portion here, you see the red door, it has a little beam coming out. They used to haul the hay up and store the hay at the top loft there when the horses were down below. There's an image of it back in the day. And this is what it looks like today. It's been converted into a house. Very nicely done.
Yeah.
Didn't look like that when the horses were there. And then this is the main house. This is what the house in front of that carriage house looked like. It's called the Russell House. And I think this Russell was involved in barrel making for the bourbon industry. This is another carriage house. This is in the Cherokee Triangle area. It's now been converted into a residence, and that's the main house in the upper right-hand corner there. Here are some interiors of that carriage house. This is what it looks like from the alleyway. Again, from the alley, they really didn't care what it looked like. It's pretty basic. But from the main house, they wanted to look at a very nice facade. And again, the interior has been renovated into a residence. This is called the Nones House. This is also in the Cherokee Triangle area at Longest Avenue, and I think it's Longest and Ray Avenues in Cherokee Triangle. Nones, he was the owner of Kentucky Wagon Company, another wagon owner. And Kentucky Wagon today still exists. They build semi-trailer trucks, not so much wagons. But Nones built this house and lived here. It's now the house for the University of Louisville president lives here. But they have a very nice carriage house, as you can tell, which has also been turned into a residence. And they allow visiting professors and visiting people to the University of Louisville to stay in this carriage house. So here's what it looks like, some of the details, very nicely done. U of L keeps it up very well. Osley Brown Frazier donated it to the University of Louisville, and that's why it's called Amelia's Place. Amelia was Osley Brown Frazier's mother, and why it's called Amelia's Place. Very nice. This is looking from the other side, where the carriages would come in. Yeah. This is the interior of it. Now the next carriage house is one of my favorites, if not the most favorite of mine. This is called the Akers Carriage House, built by a guy named Matthew Akers. Matthew Akers was in the railroad business. He was superintendent or general manager of the Big Four Railroad Company, which today we remember it by the Big Four Railroad Bridge. But Matthew Akers was connected to that enterprise, that railroad company, and he built this very, I call it more of an arts and crafts style carriage house. Just phenomenal. It's been also converted into a residence as well. Here are some of the interior photographs of that carriage house. Very nicely done. Beautiful carriage house. I told one of the owners of this that if I win the lottery, I'm coming for his house.
Right.
I love this carriage house. It's off of Lexington Road at Alta Gate. Now then, you may ask, well, that's the carriage house. What does the main house look like? Well, that's the main house. Now notice the two different architectural styles.
Yeah.
One is very arts and craft, and one is very classical design. So what's going on here? Why did the architect design one in one style and the other? Well, actually, the architect, who was, wait a minute, let's go back, was John Bacon Hutchins, who designed this arts and crafts style. They built the carriage house first. And so I have a feeling that Matthew Akers, once he saw this and what it cost and all, he goes, I can only imagine what the main house would look like. And he probably said, I ain't got the bucks to build the main house.
Right.
And I'm not even sure John Bacon Hutchins, I'm guessing he designed the main house, but it was never built. So Akers sold this property. He did not live here. He sold the carriage house and the property for the main house to the Speed family. William Shawcross Speed on Alta Gate there. And the Speeds hired another architect, I think he was, Charles Platt, he was from out of town, and he built this classical home here for the Speeds. So again, the carriage house does not reflect the same style as the main house. Very curious. The Garden Court Carriage House, which is on the cover of my book, which I mentioned earlier. This is Garden Court is off Alta Vista Road. It's now part of the Presbyterian Seminary, I believe, that owns all this. In fact, the Presbyterian Seminary Foundation is located in this carriage house now. There's Garden Court. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's one of the grand mansions of Louisville. The Norton family owned this. Some interior photographs of it since it's been renovated. Now, one thing I always like to point out about this carriage house is, let me see if there's any other images that I've got of this. The floor of the second floor is suspended structurally from from the roof, from the beams in the roof. So they got rods, they got structure up in the ceiling that come down that connect the second floor and hold it up. So there are no columns on the first floor. There are no structural columns holding up that second floor on the first floor. The second floor is held up by being suspended from the beams in the roof. Very innovative structural design. Now, why did they do that? The reason why they suspended the second floor was to allow the horse carriages to move about on the first floor without hitting any columns or being obstructed by the columns. So the lower level, the first floor, totally column free, just big wide open space so that the horses and carriages can move about. Now then, this carriage house back in the late 1900s, 1990s or so, the Presbyterians wanted to tear this down and demolish this carriage house, and we, as horrible preservationists, said, oh, time out, we think you can save it, which we advocated for that, and they were able to save it. And so here it was being saved. It was in very dilapidated condition, as you can see, and they had to do a total renovation of it. But it turned out very well, and so it was rededicated in 2003. So the Carriage House and Garden Court, and again, the Presbyterian Foundation currently uses that as its offices. There it is, beautiful design.
Goodness.
And you can see, again, as noted earlier, the beam that comes out, they were able to bring the hay up, store the hay for the horses there. And again, this lower level, no columns within it, holding up that upper floor. Beautiful carriage house. The next carriage house was kind of hard to find. It's called the Arden-Atherton Carriage House. This is I-71. This is I-71 at the Waterson. And I'll show you, this is Lime Kiln Lane up here. And this is how you get to this carriage house. You come off Lime Kiln Lane, you got to come down an access road back around. Very challenging directions to get to this carriage house. But I think you'll like it once I show it to you and why I included it. It was somewhat secluded. This is the access road next to it, and you had to go into the property to actually see this carriage house. That's the main house. That's the main house that owned this carriage house. And that's the carriage house itself. There it is.
Wow.
That is a carriage house. Very nicely done. That's the front of it. And the big archway area is where the carriages came and went. Very beautifully designed. The interior of it. It's now obviously a house. I think this is a carriage house has been sold several times since I did this, these photographs. Look at that. Ain't that something?
Yeah.
Horses once lived here. It's the kitchen area. Now then, this is a major date in Louisville history. October 4th, 1898. That's when the first horseless carriage came into Louisville. It was owned by John Roach, who was the president of the Louisville Carriage Company. He ordered this Waverly carriage, horseless carriage, out of Indianapolis. They brought it down by railroad, and he drove it around downtown streets, honking at everyone, I'm sure, and people were astonished to see this horseless carriage. By the way, it was an electric car. It ran on batteries. That's something innovative, isn't it? Some 100 and some odd years ago, they had battery-powered cars, which we're now going back to. Just 10 years after 1898, in 1908, there were 400 automobiles in Louisville. And it has yet to decrease. We keep getting more and more cars on the streets of Louisville since then. But that's the main date, October 4th, 1898. It was well documented when the first automobile showed up in Louisville. So what people then started to do was they still built carriage houses, but instead for horses, they built them for cars. Here's a good example of that in Old Louisville on 4th Street, the Gettleman Carriage House. He owned this person owned a variety of cars, and he built an apartment up above. There it is. That's off the alley view. Here's another carriage house in the old Louisville area. It's just off Magnolia Avenue. This was recently built in front of this house there. And again, they put living quarters up above the automobile area, the garage. That's that view out this window here. That's what you would see. Very nicely done. This next more modern carriage house, this is off Lexington Road, right opposite the Ursuline area here. Sacred Heart Academy is right above there, so this is Lexington Road. And this one gentleman purchased this property and built sort of all these homes. And one of them was this carriage house. It actually looks like a house, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like. And the cars are down below and an apartment up above. That's what it looks like on the interior. This is in Crescent Hill, this carriage house on Crescent Court. Again, you have garage down below and apartment and residence up above. There's the historic home that it's connected to. And here is that historic home and what it looked like previously. The 1974 tornado, which we're getting ready to celebrate, or not celebrate, commemorate the 50th anniversary of the April 3rd tornado is coming up. And they damaged this house and took off the top of that turret area there. That's the carriage house that was built just recently. It's not an old structure, it's more a recent build. Then Norton Commons, if you ever get out to Norton Commons there in northern, out near Oldham County, off of US, is it 22 or 42? I keep forgetting the street, but anyways, they build carriage houses out there all the time. They have alleyways also, and they have carriage houses. Here are some of those.
It looks like a firehouse.
It
Yeah.
does. It does.
Now, Norton Commons has a lot of traditional style homes in it. In fact, it's patterned on old Louisville because they still have alleyways. You don't see any driveways in Norton Commons. When you go down the main streets, all the houses are bunched up close together. There are no driveways. The cars access from the rear of the alleys. And we still have our reminders of horse carriages throughout Louisville. If you look closely, here is a watering trough, which is in the Clifton neighborhood area off Frankfort Avenue. Watering troughs, and you see these around every so often. In front of this one house here, you see a stepping stone where they would step to get into the carriage. You have I see a lot of these posts where they would tie the horse carriage up to. You see these around town a lot. And then in Cherokee Park, they built this watering trough, very decorative, there in Cherokee Park for the horses that would
You know
come
what,
and
I've
go.
always wondered, because I pass it quite a bit, what that was for.
So for horses, but yeah, they have a lot of reminders as you drive around. If you're somewhat observant, you'll see all these little things from years gone by that reference our horse culture. And you may remember the commercials not long ago of Dinwiddie Lambton driving his horse carriage through Louisville there. Be wise and be insured, as he would say, with his horse carriages. And there's Carriage Houses of Louisville. And thanks for attending. Good
Thank
deal.
you.
Nicely done.
Good deal.
Thank you so much.
Okay.